and happy middle of 2024. That's crazy. This year is going by so fast. I believe the exact middle of 2024 was July 2nd, and the day I'm filming this is July 9th. So a little bit later than mid-year, but that's okay. I did the same video last year, and I thought it was really fun to first look at all my reading stats, and then we'll jump in to answering a bunch of questions as part of the mid-year book tag. And then lastly, I'm going to do a speed one-sentence summary of every book I've read so far this year. My reading goal for this year is to read 90 books, and so far I've read 46 books, so I'm exactly on track, which is so exciting. I think it'd be so sick to reach 100 books this year, but I didn't want to stress myself out because reading is for fun and not trying to hit a number. But if I did hit 100 books, that'd be cool. And I always log my review of all my books on Goodreads, but Goodreads doesn't have stats, and Storygraph has stats, and you can like import your Goodreads library into Storygraph to get your stats. So that's what I did. I haven't looked at these at all, so I'm seeing them for the first time with you guys. Whoa, that's crazy to see it laid out this way. I know I've read 46 books this year, but to see it as 19,908 pages is pretty cool. My main reading mood is emotional, which makes sense being a romance reader. Then funny. I'm actually surprised by that. I guess rom-coms. And third, adventurous. Okay, I feel like that's my fantasy side coming into play. I read 98% fiction, 2% nonfiction. I think the one nonfiction I read this year was Spare by Prince Harry. Out of the 46 books I read, 25 were romance, which is a lot, but I'm honestly surprised it's not more. 19 were contemporary. See, I feel like those are also probably romance, like contemporary romance. 17 fantasy, that's a pretty good chunk. 11 young adult books, and then 3 thriller, 3 mystery. My most read authors, I knew this was gonna be number 1, Sarah J. Maas. That's pretty much just because I read the Throne of Glass series, which is a huge series. And my average star rating, 3.96 stars. Last year, my average star rating was 4 stars, so pretty similar, but a little lower than last year. Maybe I'm becoming a little bit more of a critic by 0.04 stars. I feel like I just like love most everything I read. And now let's get into the mid-year book tag. I'm stealing all these questions from Rachel Catherine, so shout out to Rachel Catherine. And our first question is the hardest one, the best book I've read so far in 2024. Project Hail Mary. I love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. I loved how this book is both like really high stakes, edge of your seat, world-ending high stakes. And then on the other hand, you have the best, most wholesome friendship ever. And the plot of this book is wild. Basically, Ryland wakes up on a spaceship in space with no memory. Like he has no idea what's going on or where he is. And that's the start of the book on page 1, which is absolutely terrifying. Like, can you imagine waking up in space alone? Crazy. And it's dual timeline, so it goes back and forth between him in the spaceship and the past of like how he got there. And I have literally convinced everyone in my life to read this book. When my friend Riley sent me this book because she loved it, I read it and loved it. I made Danny read it. He just read it and loved it. He gave it 4.4 stars, which for him is really high. He is of the belief that no book can ever be 5 stars because no book is perfect. So I feel like 4.4 stars for him is basically like my 5 stars. And I've also now convinced my mom to read it for her book club. Okay, question number 2, what's it gonna be? Best sequel you've read so far in 2024. It's gotta be Vow of Thieves. The romance is enemies to lovers, and like by the last book, you're just so invested in them. I love Cassie and Jace's characters so much. They have such interesting and rich backstories. Cassie was a street thief, and then she starts working in the Queen's Guard, and then Jace is the leader of this outlaw family, and the action in this book moved so fast. Like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Next question is, new release you haven't read yet but want to. Wait, I don't know. I feel like we've gotten so many amazing new releases this year from Emily Henry, Carly Fortune, Elsie Silver, Ali Hazelwood, and I've just been reading them immediately when they've been coming out. Well, right now I'm in the middle of Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, but I am in the middle of it, so I feel like this one doesn't count. Let me go raid my bookshelves. I've decided on 2 books. Both are enemies to lovers romantasy books. I think that if I could only read one niche forever, it would be enemies to lovers romantasy books. They're just the best. The first one is Veiled Kingdom, and she is the daughter of the king, and then he is the leader of the rebel group. Like that's just a great enemies to lovers setup. And this sentence specifically really gets me. It says, he allows no one to touch me, tries to protect me, yet threatens me at every turn. And then the second one is Heartless Hunter, and I believe this is a young adult book. And it says, enemies to lovers doesn't get more high stakes than a witch and a witch hunter falling in love. Again, like it doesn't get more enemies than that. Also, I made a list of my top 10 favorite books, not just of this year so far, but of all time, which was really difficult to decide on. I struggled to even pick a favorite book of the year. Actually, I think I just chose from books that I've read since getting back into reading in 2020. But I made this list in Notion, who has kindly sponsored today's video. I love Notion so much, and you can read the list of my top 10 books. I'll have it linked down below. And I was able to make this list and share it with you guys because Notion has just launched Notion Sites, which is so exciting. Through Notion, you can now publish your own website. I've been a big Notion user for a long time. I organize and keep track of so many things in my personal life and work life in Notion. So for them to now add the ability to actually publish your Notion pages to the web is so smart. And just to give you guys some inspo of how you guys might use Notion Sites, if you are looking for a job or applying to colleges, you could make a resume or create a portfolio in Notion. You could also create a job posting if you're looking to hire, create a website for your startup, or just make some fun pages. Like you could start a blog or a website with all your recipes, or even things to share with your friends and family, like your top 10 books, your reading journal from the year. And I really love that Notion is so easy to use because in my head, I feel like the idea of starting a website sounds like overwhelming, time consuming, but in Notion, it is truly so easy. When I made the page of my top 10 books, I actually started off using a template. Notion has tons and tons of templates, and I love starting from a template and then customizing it. So I found a template that I really liked for writing a blog post. And then I went in and obviously added my own text, made it way more bookish. And if you're not sure how to do something, they also have an AI chat box where you can ask AI how to do something. And then once your site is done and you're ready to publish it, you just press share and then publish. And then you can manage all of your domains and websites all in one place within Notion. And Notion is free to use. You can try Notion Sites for free or access premium features for $12 a month, all at the link in my description. And then I also have made several Notion templates. I've talked about them a ton in the past, so I won't bore you with all the details again, but I have a virtual reading journal that I'll also link down below that's completely free to use. Let's get back to talking about all the books I've read so far this year. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Okay, hands down, don't even have to look it up, is Daydream by Hannah Grace. This book is just so incredibly bookish, which makes me so happy. The character's meet cute is when Henry accidentally crashes her book club. Like, how cute is that? And then he's struggling with his class reading list, so she agrees to tutor him. She's also writing a novel on the side, so there's just so many nods to books and everything a book lover loves. I just love reading about books full of books. Next is Biggest Surprise. Okay, this could be taken a few directions. Like, I was surprised with how much I liked the book or how much I disliked the book. Okay, I've decided to answer the question in both ways. A Million Junes and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Which book do you think I loved and which one do you think I hated? I loved A Million Junes and I hated Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. I know that I love Emily Henry as an author, but this is one of her early books. I actually just looked it up and it's the second book she ever published in 2017, and then Beach Read was her first like really big hit in 2020. So I was like, okay, it never got super popular. It was a few years prior to Beach Read, her big hit. Surely it's not as good as her current day books because it wasn't her first big hit. And I couldn't have been more surprised by this just being like a perfect book for me. It was so complex and so heartfelt and so emotional. It's magical realism. And she does an amazing job at it. Like, she should write more magical realism. The magic of the world was so unique to me. I've never read anything like it. And I would say this book is 50% romance and 50% a book about grief. And I am just shocked that it was not her first big hit. Like, why did Beach Read blow up and this one didn't? I don't know. And then Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This was my first DNF of the year. And I was so shocked because I had heard nothing but just like amazing glowing reviews about this book. To me, this is such a like slice of life, like character study book. I just personally, I don't know why, like didn't really bond with the characters. And if you don't really bond with the characters in a very character heavy book, then like you probably won't like it. And that was my experience. It also moved quite slow to me. I don't know. I just found that like I don't really love slice of life. Like I more want a very like central, high stakes, beginning, middle, end. Next question, favorite new author, debut, or new to you? Okay, I scrolled through my Goodreads and I picked two authors. These are not new authors, but I didn't read any books by them until this year. Catherine Center, and second is Runix. This book is a closed door romance, and I think most, if not all of her books are closed door romances. And I generally like more spicy books, so I wasn't really sure how I would feel about specifically an adult closed door romance, and I really liked it. I think she really focused on their emotional connection over any physical connection, which I loved. Like, it made their connection feel so strong and so passionate, and it was just such a wholesome, like, feel-good book. And then Runix, I read The Predator and the Reaper. These are both mafia romances. I read these as a part of my Reading Dark Romances for a week video, and in that video I was struggling. I was reading a lot of dark romances that I did not like, and then I read these two books. She did such a great job of writing this very dark world. Obviously the mafia do questionable things, but the two main characters, despite being in the mafia world, I still really liked them. And that's something that's really important to me for dark romance. is in order to like the book, I need to find the characters likable. And she did a great job of towing that line. Newest fictional crush. I actually don't know what I'm gonna say for this. I've decided on Jake from The Risk and Ford Grant from Wild Love. Every hockey romance, I feel like all the guys are just so attractive, but I think out of all the books in the Brer You series by Elle Kennedy, Jake Conley has been my favorite. He's just so attractive. And then Ford Grant, he's a billionaire, he's in the music industry, he lives in a small town, he's a dad. Specifically, the single dad trope has really been my weak spot. I think if a man shows that he can care for another entire human being and be like the best dad, means he's likely gonna be just like a really great partner. Next up is a book that made you cry. I think 2 books total this year have made me cry. All the Bright Places. It was so sad. The ending, oh, it made me cry so hard. I think it was just because I loved the characters so much and I just didn't want anything bad to happen to them ever. Looking back on it, it's such a beautiful book and heartbreaking book, and I think the author made all the right choices with the story. But at the time when I was reading it, I wasn't sure how to feel about it because I was sad that the book was sad. But now I can look back on it with how much I love it, having now processed the sad. And then recently I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and cried like a little baby. I don't want to say too much of my thoughts on that book because I'm gonna talk about it and read it in my next reading vlog, but just know I cried, and that's all I'm gonna say. Next is a book that made you happy, and I'm hands down gonna go with Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel and Solomon. I had read one Rachel and Solomon book before the X Talk, and I thought it was okay, so I was very like unsure of what I would think about this book going into this. I don't know what crack Rachel and Solomon put in this book, but I swear I was just like smiling half the time I was reading it. It made me so giddy and happy. And it's a really neat concept. The entire book takes place in a 24-hour period on the last day of senior year of high school. And so each chapter says like the time. Most beautiful book you've bought or received this year. I've bought quite a few special editions, so let me rapid fire show them all to you. I got a special edition of Throne of Glass, cool box, but wait, even cooler book. So shimmery, so shiny. I got this copy of Funny Story with sprayed edges, and then we've got art on the hardcover and art inside the book. Also, hefty copy of Six of Crows duology. So pretty. The end pages, I don't know if you can see all the detail, but like insane detail. It's got art, a cool hardcover, and it came with the second book as well. Haven't read the Six of Crows duology yet, but I really want to this year, which brings us to the next and last question. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Six of Crows duology for sure. Also, I desperately need to read Ruthless Vows. I'm actually so embarrassed that I haven't read this book yet. The amount of times I have said in recent videos, I'm gonna read this book, and then I don't, is frankly embarrassing. So I need to read the book, and I really want to read the book. There's also quite a few series where I only have one book left in the series, so I just need to finish it. I need to read the last book in the Twisted series, the last book in the None Shall Sleep series, last book in the One of Us is Lying series, the Hades Persephone series, the last book in the Rowan and Neil series. Also have one more book in the Brer You series, and I think that's it. Any standalones I want to read this year? I really desperately need to read Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I feel like everyone and their mom has read this book, and I've just heard amazing things about it. I've read one Kennedy Ryan book before, but definitely want to delve way more into her books, and this one is at the top of my list from her. And other than that, I feel like just kind of mood reading for the rest of the year. And now it is time to rapid fire all 46 books I've read so far this year. I started off the year with Spare by Prince Harry. Spare was a one-sided yet very fascinating and surprisingly relatable book about Prince Harry and the royal family. I do need to add a little asterisk by relatable. Obviously, being a prince and his life and the way he grew up, not relatable, but a lot of the themes like identity and grief and privacy were surprisingly really relatable, which I enjoyed. Already off to a bad start on keeping the review to one sentence. Let's try again. The Throne of Glass series. I think I'm gonna review these books in like pairs because it feels hard to give one sentence for an entire 8-book series. Starting off with The Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass, the plots were so unique, and I really fell in love with Selena's character and how badass she is in these 2 books. Crown of Midnight, Air Fire, and Queen of Shadows. The fantasy plot, so high stakes and wild, but I was so obsessed with these 3 books specifically because of the romance. Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash. While I enjoyed these books, I was a bit let down that they were my least favorite books in the series, considering they were the end of the series when I should hypothetically be the most invested I ever am in the series. They moved kind of slow to me. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, we all know that was my first DNF of the year. So This Is Love So this is love. That's not my review. That's just like the Cinderella song. Anyway, such a cute, light, quick, easy rom-com fairy tale retelling read. And I liked how the author put her own twist on the original Cinderella story by adding lots of politics in the castle. These are all definitely run-on sentences, but no one say anything. Butcher and Blackbird and Leather and Lark. I just love that these books are so absurd, murderous, gory, and still have great heartfelt romances. Hopeless, the last book in the Chestnut Spring series, I wrote in my Goodreads review, both Bailey and Beau had such hard backstories. It made me want to give them both a big hug the entire book. I loved them. Love Theoretically, my favorite Ali Hazelwood book, period. No, just kidding. I have more to say than that. I'm sorry. Let me try again. My favorite Ali Hazelwood book because Elsie, the main character, had so much about her that I found so relatable, but also so many things about her life that were so unrelatable to me and so interesting to read about. Terms and Conditions and Final Offer. I loved this entire series. Reading about billionaires is so fun, but Terms and Conditions was my favorite in the entire series. Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I loved that we get majority romance, but also politics and a little mystery and of a history of this fictional world. The Predator and the Reaper. I love that it's actual enemies to lovers. I wrote in my Goodreads review. The first chapter literally starts with Marana trying to kill Tristan. Swoon. Hooked. I know the main character is supposed to be a villain, but he was too villainous for me. Sweet Sin. I read this prequel planning to then read Promises and Pomegranates, and I hated the prequel so much, I decided to never read Promises and Pomegranates. The Bodyguard, so cute, wholesome, adorable, and every other synonym of those words. The Risk and the Play. College hockey romances always get me. I always love them. Ruin and Rising. This is the last book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I like this series, but for some reason, I never cared that much about Mal and Alina, which is what has kept it from being a 5-star series for me. A Million Junes checked every box for me. Twisted Hate. I think my favorite thing about this book is the fact that they hate each other continues to be a part of the book and their relationship even after they start to fall in love. I hate in enemies to lovers books when the enemies portion just disappears super quickly. Project Hail Mary. I mean, I loved it so much, I have forced every single person in my life to read it. I think that says enough. All the Right Places. I mean, talk about an emotional roller coaster. I felt giddy, happy, hopeful, sad, angry, you name it, I felt it. Destination Unknown. I like how this author tackled so many tough topics, like how hard it is to be gay in general, but especially in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic. But this book also made me tear up. I forgot to include that in the books that made me cry. It was actually the author's note that made me cry, which I think is a first for me. 1,000 Steps Into Night, officially my second DNF of the year. I don't know why. This book just wasn't holding my attention, even though it had all the great elements of a fantasy. The Nanny, great setup for a book. She is an OnlyFans girl and then becomes a nanny and falls for the dad of the girl she's nannying, but I don't think the plot lived up to the great concept. Wild Love, I mean, so many great tropes. He's a billionaire, it's small town, workplace romance, brother's best friend, single parent, Keeper of Enchanted Rooms, such a cozy and comforting fantasy book. Reading it felt like a warm hug. The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson, not my #1 favorite Holly Jackson book, but I never saw the ending coming, and I loved that it takes place on the set of a true crime documentary. This summer will be different. The summer vibes were vibing in this book. And it had depth. Funny Story by Emily Henry. I actually wrote a list of my top favorite 8 things about this book on my Goodreads review. I won't read you the whole list, but I'll name a few things. I love that Daphne is a librarian. It takes place in summer by the beach, and the forced proximity and fake dating of roommates who have just gotten their heart broken. How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong. There were a lot of elements about this book that were really unique to me, like the fact that they're both screenwriters working together and that they have a very complicated and heartbreaking past together. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I love that this book had such a complicated and realistic conflict, and also that the male love interest has a pet goat that wears pajamas. That was so cute. Today, Tonight, Tomorrow. I mean, the book takes place in 24 hours, and I read it in 24 hours because I couldn't put it down. Pride and Premeditation. Although I have not read Pride and Prejudice, I loved this murderous take on the original Pride and Prejudice story. The Dance of Thieves duology. I just love Jason Kazi with my whole heart. And then the 2 most recent ones I read, I am going to be reading in my next video's reading vlog, so not going to share my full review yet. If you follow me on Goodreads, you've already seen my review, but I'm going to save my YouTube review for that video. And that is every single book I've read so far this year. I've had a great reading year. I would love to hear like y'all's answers to some of these questions, like what is your favorite book and what is your least favorite book? I'm so specifically intrigued, like what's your least favorite book? I want to hear everyone's bookish hot take. And with that, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!